And bad morning to everybody out there. We're on Hangout still because of technical issues with the primary computer that will be hosting it on Discord/OBS. But this should be resolved by tomorrow because it's basically just a restart issue. So I'm gonna find a way to like, I don't know, work it so that I can get notified that my computer needs to restart before it needs to restart, or just like notified of when an update comes out. But whatever, like that's a separate issue, separate time, separate day, blah blah. But anyway, I hope y'all's weekend was good. In a very bad way. I hope that while we weren't telling you how bad the news was, that you still knew that there was bad news afoot. We've got a bunch to cover because Saturday and Sunday happened and we didn't. So with that being said, we have one bit of housekeeping to get to before we start. Two, actually. First off, patreon.com/badmorningnews. You can find us there and support the channel. We are open to suggestions for tiered rewards, and yours might be taken as one of the suggestions we use. So feel free to use our Discord, contact us on Twitter, contact us on Facebook, contact us anywhere. Just send a prayer out and we'll probably hear it, because we are turning into godly gods of being able to tell you things with our words.
We are that in
anyway,
tune with the universe, people.
Absolutely. And the second bit of housekeeping is we have a new host. You can find him Cryptic-Cynic on Twitter. I think there's a hyphen there. And his name is CJ, both there and on here. So please give a fireball-sized warm welcome to our latest bearer of bad news, which, by the way, I'm just going to say this. I think it's fucking hilarious that people almost dropped McCain's casket. That's fucking great. Even though we're not really going to cover that much, I just thought it was funny to watch. And I thought that for some reason, like, I wasn't planning on bringing that up, but when I said bearer of bad news, fucking Paul Bears just jumped into my brain for no reason.
The only thing more fitting would have been if they'd actually dropped it. So
that would, and if the fucking latch had unlatched and he'd fucking out and fucking one last roll for McCain. Anyway, so introduce yourself, Cryptic-Cynic, and let people know who you are, what you do, where you can be found, etc. Anything you want.
Thank you guys for having me. And I also will add that was very hilarious, and I too would have wished to see his body fall upon the ground in a last hurrah. But anyway, yeah, my name is CJ. I comment in the YouTube chat as CJ King. But other than that, Twitter, my handle is at cryptic_cynic, and I am on Steemit as Cryptic-Cynic. I haven't been as active with that lately, but I have plans to, hopefully get back into writing. That's mostly my strength. And as far as what I do right now, I'm working towards appliance repair, finishing up classes on that. So I guess that'll be my main skill, hopefully soon. Other than that, I've been around. I used to do more traditional activist type stuff, raising awareness mostly around anti-war stuff. I'm currently located in Seattle, Washington, probably for a couple more months, and then probably won't be here anymore for various reasons. But yeah, just living the life, trying to, avoid, state infringements upon my life. Just trying to make my way through life, I guess, like most people are. And, just trying to be as authentic as I can in that, and while not losing my mind completely. So there you go. That's about it. Don't have too much to add. Thank you guys for having me. It's good to join you here.
Yeah, and by the way, we will have slots open for, I think, if we can get this going, up to 50 people at once, even though that's going to be insane if we ever do. So if you decide that you want to jump on board and you have one or more days in the week that you could be solid on, CJ is going to be out tomorrow, but the rest of the week and every day after should work generally fine, he says. So we should be looking at a fairly solid block there. Just hit us up, and I'm also going to post the article and video submission guidelines today for being just submission-based poster for Bad Morning News. So we've got our first post already, and it works, but it sort of was posted before I posted about the submissions in general, and I still don't have the stuff transferred over, so maybe that'll happen today as well. But essentially, yeah, all that stuff. Before we get lost in the weeds with boring, there's a museum in Brazil, I think, that caught on fire. You were going to bring something about that up, Minute Cookbook?
Absolutely, yeah. So let's get started here. This comes to us, the article is via The Guardian, but basically everyone's running this story this morning. The article, the byline is from a Dom Phillips. Brazil Museum fire, quote, incalculable loss as 200-year-old Rio institution gutted. Brazil's oldest and most important historical and scientific museum has been consumed by fire, and much of its archive of 20 million items is believed to have been destroyed. The fire at Rio de Janeiro's 200-year-old National Museum began after it closed to the public on Sunday and raged into the night. There were no reports of injuries, but the loss to Brazilian science, history, and culture was incalculable, as two of its vice directors said. It was the biggest natural history museum in Latin America. We have invaluable collections that are over 100 years old. Cristina Sereo, one of the museum's vice directors, told G1 news site. Marina Silva, a former environment minister and candidate in October's presidential elections, said the fire was like a lobotomy of the Brazilian memory. Let's see. It wasn't immediately clear how the fire began. The museum was part of Rio's Federal University, but had fallen into disrepair in recent years. Its impressive collections included items brought to Brazil by Dom Pedro I, the Portuguese Prince Regent who declared the then colony's independence from Portugal, Egyptian and Greco-Roman artifacts, Louisa, a 12,000-year-old skeleton and the oldest in the Americas, fossils, dinosaurs, and a meteorite found in 1784. Some of the archive was stored in another building, but much of the collection is believed to have been destroyed. Let's see. Then it just goes on for a little bit collecting statements from people, but that's really the gist of what happened there. So, you know, I always feel awful about tragedies like this. And the destruction of history, intentional or unintentional, is, I think, some of the greatest losses human mind can bear. Or humankind can bear, rather. It's awful to see something like this, especially to start a Monday.
Wholeheartedly agree. I mean, I've lived through fire, so yeah, it's not fun. And I know what it's like to lose it personally. So for an entire nation to lose collective history and achievement records, I mean, that kind of shit is just, it's a tragedy, is what it is.
To lose a 12,000-year-old skeleton, especially, who knows what secrets that could have unveiled to us as we continue archaeological and biological advancements. We could have learned a lot from something like that.
Yeah, potentially. Unfortunately, now we won't.
Well, and, you know, I think that this is a learning moment because what we have here is the ability to scan things with 3D technology so that they're forever viewable and, you know, view them in a context that doesn't store them in a public museum capable of what sounds like arson. So what I would recommend, as the going forward solution, is something that's probably, already been brought up, but whatever. 3D scan this stuff, give people the 3D model to look at and play around with on a screen, and eschew the physical object museum model, because let's be completely frank, they should never have been in a museum. They should have been in a research lab or something similar where people could, get access to them, who could treat them in a sterile fashion, etc. Instead of having them out in public where pretty much anything could and did happen to them. So
yeah, I couldn't agree
that's my
anymore,
assessment.
Jeremiah. I think that's a great solution to it, and I think it's something we should have been looking at as soon as we had the technology. Too oftentimes we wait for bad shit to happen before we consider better ways.
You mentioned arson. Is there evidence for that?
Okay, so that was my assumption, just to be, fair and balanced, etc. Blah. But the fact that it happened after it was closed, and the fact that, from what it sounds like, the fire started at the museum, it really does seem like arson.
That's worrying. Because if it is, then again, cui bono? To what purpose? Why set fire to that? It's, again, unless it could be a really stupid little reason like insurance fraud, or it could be something more sinister. Like you said, a 12,000-year-old skeleton that you no longer can examine.
That's one of my favorite rabbit holes to go down, but it's probably not the best place for morning news.
No, it's a bit deep. Everybody's waking up. Let them have a cup of coffee at least.
Or like I did, which was 2 caffeine pills worth about 3.
Jesus Christ, man. But yeah, it's a terrible tragedy, that one, unfortunately. I wish there was something positive to say in that circumstance, except for our hearts and whatnot go out, and prayers go out to the people of Brazil at this time. And I really do hope it wasn't arson.
Yeah, same type of loss, though obviously not to the scale of the Library of Alexandria and whatnot.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so on that scale, we have one of the links that Cynic brought up. I think would be valuable to bring up. Let's talk about that woman in the Nevada jail cell. Let's talk about that for a bit, because I think that's a fairly good way to sink our teeth into the rest of the news.
All right, I'll go ahead and read this article. I found it through a local news site here, but I guess it's originally posted in the Reno Gazette-Journal, written by Ann Jeanette Damon. Let's see, and this article came out on the 2nd, yesterday, I guess. All right. Woman lay dead in Nevada jail cell for hours after deputy found her unresponsive. Reno, Nevada. Locked away in a Nevada county jail for failing to take care of her traffic tickets, 27-year-old Kelly Coltrane asked to go to the hospital. Instead, as her condition worsened, she was handed a mop and told to clean up her own vomit. She died in her jail cell less than an hour later. Despite being in a video-monitored cell, Mineral County Sheriff's deputies did not recognize that Coltrane had suffered an apparent seizure and had not moved for more than 6 hours. When a deputy finally entered her cell and couldn't wake her, he did not call for medical assistance or attempt to resuscitate her. Coltrane lay dead in her cell until the next morning when state officials arrived to investigate. Details of Coltrane's death 13 months ago came to light this week with the release of a 300-page report compiled by state investigators. The investigation found that Coltrane's jailers violated multiple policies when they denied her medical care after she informed them she was dependent on drugs and suffered seizures when she went through withdrawals. The investigators also asked the Mineral County District Attorney to consider criminal charges in the case. After finding evidence, the Mineral County Sheriff's Office may have violated state laws prohibiting inhumane treatment of prisoners and using one's official authority for oppression. To avoid a conflict of interest, the investigation was forwarded to Lyon County District Attorney Stephen Rye for review. Rye declined to press charges in the case. Surprise, surprise. The review of the case, in our opinion, did not establish any willful or malicious acts by jail staff that would justify the filing of charges under the requirements of the statute, Rye said. Coltrane's family feels otherwise. On Wednesday, Coltrane's mother, father, and grandmother filed a wrongful death lawsuit accusing the sheriff's office of ignoring her life-threatening medical condition despite knowing that she was suffering withdrawals and had a history of seizures. Jail staff knew Kelly Coltrane had lain for days at the jail in bed, buried beneath blankets, vomiting multiple times, refusing meals, trembling, shaking, and rarely moving. Lawyers Terry Kaiser Cooper and Carrie Doyle wrote in the lawsuit, defendants knew Kelly Coltrane was in medical distress. Kelly Coltrane's medical condition was treatable and her death preventable, the lawyers wrote. If Miss Coltrane had received timely and appropriate medical care, she would not have died. Kelly Coltrane suffered a protracted, extensive, painful, unnecessary death as a result of defendants' failures. Kaiser Cooper, who has a decades-long career of successful civil rights lawsuits against Northern Nevada police agencies, said that this case is, quote, the worst I have ever seen in 33 years. I've never seen anything like this. Mineral County Sheriff Randy Adams referred questions to the county's lawyer, but did say he is in the process of updating the jail's policies. Obviously, it's terribly unfortunate and it's tragic, Adams said. That's really all I can say. The county's lawyer, Brett Ryman of Reno, also described Coltrane's death as a tragedy and said the sheriff has hired the Legal and Liability Risk Management Institute to update the jail's policies and provide training for deputies. He declined to answer any specific questions about the investigation because of the family's lawsuit. It's just really difficult for a small rural county like this to handle what is just a massive problem, Ryman said. There are so many people addicted to substances who end up going through withdrawal in the jail. Mineral County is a tiny rural county southeast of Washoe County. Its population is just under 4,500. Kaiser Cooper described Coltrane as a successful student, a friendly, outgoing girl, and an exceptionally talented soccer player who was close to her family. She developed depression and a drug addiction after a knee injury as a teenager living in Las Vegas, the lawsuit said. The day she was arrested, although she was living in Texas, Coltrane had visited Reno and Lake Tahoe for a family reunion to celebrate her grandmother's 75th birthday. After the celebration, Coltrane was pulled over for speeding outside Hawthorne on July 19, 2017, according to the investigation by the Nevada Division of Investigation, because she had failed to take care of previous traffic violations in Clark County. The officer who stopped her decided to book her into the Mineral County Jail. While being booked, Coltrane initially refused to answer questions about her medical history and next of kin, but soon after she learned she wouldn't be able to make bail, she informed Sergeant Jim Holland that she was dependent on drugs and had a history of seizures when she went through withdrawals, according to the investigative report. After Coltrane came forward with her medical history, Holland did not follow a jail policy that requires inmates with a history of seizures to be cleared by a doctor before being held at the jail. Nor did jail staff follow medical protocol of carefully monitoring the vitals of a person undergoing withdrawals. In fact, the jail had no on-site medical care, relying instead on the hospital across the street to attend to inmates' medical needs and prescriptions. About 4 hours after she was booked into the jail, Coltrane told the night deputy she needed to go to the hospital right away for medication. Instead of following the jail's medical care policy, he told Coltrane she couldn't get help unless he determined her life was at risk. Unfortunately, since you're DTing, referring to the detoxification process, I'm not going to take you over to the hospital right now just to get your fix, Deputy Ray Golshinsky told Coltrane, according to the investigation report. That's not the way detention works, unfortunately. You are incarcerated with us, so you don't get to go to the hospital when you want. When we feel that your life is at risk, then you will go. Coltrane spent the next 3 days in her cell, eating almost nothing and drinking a little bit of water. She spent most of her time curled in the fetal position underneath blankets. Early on July 22nd, 2017, her third day in the jail, Coltrane began vomiting, trembling, and making short, convulsive type movements, according to the investigative report. A little after 5 p.m. that day, Holland brought Coltrane dinner and water and tried to talk her into eating a little bit of food. She ate a few bites. Holland then brought her a new set of jail clothing to replace her soiled uniform and a mop, asking her to clean the vomit from her floor, according to the report. Coltrane sat still for a few minutes until Holland returned and asked her again to mop. According to video reviewed by the Reno Gazette-Journal, Coltrane then began mopping her floor while still sitting on her bed. She was trembling during the process and stopped often to rest. A few minutes later, Holland returns to point out the spots she had missed. Coltrane wipes up the spots and Holland leaves with the mop. Holland later told an investigator that he thought it was odd Coltrane didn't get out of bed to mop the floor. Sergeant Holland advised he thought Coltrane was just lazy and that she just didn't want to stand up to clean the floor. The report said Sergeant Holland advised he just wanted the floor to be cleaned and he didn't care how it got done, just that it got cleaned up. This was the last time Coltrane was seen alive. Hours passed before deputies realized she's dead, paramedics not called. Less than an hour later, Coltrane was shown on the video lying in the fetal position when her body suddenly goes rigid and her legs straighten, while on her stomach her face slowly rises toward the back wall and her arm stretches out and hangs off the bed. Her head lowers back onto the mattress, and for the next several minutes her body appears to go through periodic convulsions. Coltrane then stops moving entirely about 6:26 p.m. The video shows her lying still in the same position until about 12:30 a.m. when Golchinsky arrives to move her to a different cell and finds her unresponsive. According to the investigation report, the 20-minute section of video depicting Golchinsky entering her cell was missing entirely from the files the state obtained for its investigation from the sheriff's office, but a Reno Gazette-Journal reporter found the video in files provided by Kaiser Cooper. The video shows Golchinsky walk into the cell and nudge Coltrane's leg with the tip of his boot. When she didn't respond, he enters the cell, looks at her face, briefly touches her arm, and then quickly exits the cell. According to the investigative report, Golchinsky notified his superiors that Coltrane appeared dead and was cold to the touch. The video then shows him re-enter the cell and check for a pulse on Coltrane's neck before leaving again. The sheriff's office then left Coltrane's body locked in the cell until a Washoe County forensic technician arrived at 5:48 a.m. to begin the investigation. No one on staff called for paramedics after finding Coltrane lying unresponsive and cold on her bed. According to the investigation, the lawsuit said the sheriff's office had no policy for what to do after discovering an unresponsive inmate. The Washoe County medical examiner labeled Coltrane's death accidental caused by complications of drug use. The toxicology results showed she had heroin in her system. Golchinsky told investigators that he had periodically looked at Coltrane from the video monitor outside her cell, but thought she was asleep. The sheriff's policy requires deputies to physically check inmates under observation at least twice an hour if they are lying under blankets. That didn't occur, according to the investigation. Holland told investigators that Coltrane never looked good, but that he couldn't force medical attention on inmates. The state investigator assigned to the case, Detective Damon Earle, noted in his report that had Golchinsky and Holland adhered to some of the department policies in place, Coltrane may have not been in as much danger. There were a limited number of times where Coltrane had actual contact with staff. Earl wrote, "This may be significant because had more contact been made with Coltrane, indicators of Kelly's medical condition may have been observed. These indicators may have alerted staff, therefore prompting medical attention to be rendered to Coltrane." At one point in his investigation, Earl timed his walk from the jail to the hospital across the street. It took a little over 2 minutes. Ryman Mineral County's lawyer said he couldn't comment on the specifics of the investigation, including why no one called for emergency medical help when Coltrane was discovered unresponsive. He also wouldn't comment on whether any disciplinary action was taken against either Golchinski or Holland. The lawsuit, however, said both men were disciplined, but that Holland opted to retire early. In June, the Mineral County Commission voted unanimously to buy Holland an additional year toward his service for a cost of $17,853. The buyout allowed Holland to retire with a higher annual pension and health care benefits than if it had been denied. In reviewing the case for the criminal charges, Rye, the Lyon County District Attorney, said he couldn't find evidence that the two jailers acted maliciously. Based on my review, they did not notice any warning signs warranting medical intervention based on their training or experience. Rice said they were provided information related to her, and it appeared to me that was taken into account in her housing and monitoring. The officers did not ignore information provided to them, and based on reports by the NDI, it did not appear that they exhibited any cruel, oppressive, or malicious treatment. Kaiser Cooper, however, believes policies and training are less than adequate at the Mineral County Jail. The lawsuit by Coltrane's family seeks not only compensation for their loss, but also for Sheriff Adams to improve the conditions at the jail. Kaiser Cooper said the family won't settle their lawsuit without that.
They should fucking ask for his job.
Yeah, just a couple more paragraphs. Sorry, it's such a long article, but Ryman said, such changes are already underway, but within the small county's limited resources, the policies of the jail in regard to people who have addictions are undergoing withdrawals have the full attention of the sheriff in the county, despite the fact of the lawsuit. Ryman said, even outside the lawsuit, the sheriff will go forward with this kind of training. Everything will be done to the best ability of this small county. They don't have the resources of someone like Washoe County. And it's the end of that article, and I'll go ahead and let you guys comment. Obviously it really pissed me off,
Understandable.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add right now, so I'll let you guys jump in.
Well, I'm spitting venom here.
Well, right off the bat, I find it fucking impossible to believe they had no procedures whatsoever for this in place. That's obviously a crock of shit to try and protect this guy.
Yeah, it's bullshit. They even mentioned the procedures that they had in place and that they weren't followed.
Well, and let's be real specific. This isn't an isolated incident. People die from withdrawals in jail cells, not necessarily regularly, but enough that Mother Jones wrote this piece on it. And I'll read a few excerpts from it. And by the way, just before anybody gets any ideas, no, I'm not a big fan of Mother Jones, but this piece is good.
Broken clocks and
yeah. Well, intentionally
sometimes diamonds are
clocks.
Sometimes diamonds are found in dross.
Go to jail, die from drug withdrawal. Welcome to the criminal justice system. By, I'm not sure if that's Julia or Julia, but I'm just going to say either. Luri. When Tyler Tabor was booked in a jail outside Denver on a spring afternoon in 2015, he told a screening nurse that he was a daily heroin user and had a prescription for Xanax. A friendly, outdoorsy 25-year-old with a son in kindergarten, Tabor had started using opioids after he injured his back on the job as a welder. When he was arrested on 2 misdemeanor warrants, his parents decided not to pay his $300 bail, thinking he would be safer in jail away from his heroin for a few days. 3 days later, Tabor died of dehydration at the Adams County Jail, according to a coroner's report. The alleged cause, drug withdrawal. So they filed the lawsuit. And then, yet as the nationwide opioid epidemic continues to spiral, more and more inmates who use heroin, painkillers, or methadone are showing up in jails across the country, where withdrawal treatment can be rudimentary. So many people are coming in hooked on opioids, says David Lane, the attorney representing the Tabors. If the jails are not trained and they're not ready for it, you get a Tyler Tabor. No organization tracks how many people have died from drug withdrawal in jail, but Mojo found 20 lawsuits filed between 2014 and 2016, alleging that an inmate died from opiate withdrawal complications. That number likely represents just a fraction of jail withdrawal deaths, Lane says. In addition to the counties, many families also sue the companies that public jails often contract with to provide health care, like Corazon Health. By the way, holy shit. Fucking hell. That's a real good name for a fucking jail system. Yeah, we're a heart. We're a fucking, we care. Corazon Health. Fucking, okay. By the time of Tabor's death in May, at least 4 other inmates in jails around the country had died that year from complications of opioid withdrawal, according to lawsuits filed by their families. In March, 37-year-old Jennifer Lobato was booked into Colorado's Jefferson County Jail just a half hour from where Tabor would die for shoplifting $57 worth of merchandise from an Old Navy with her son. A guard scoffed at Lobato, a regular heroin user, as she vomited before collapsing, according to a subsequent investigation by the sheriff's office. A month later, an 18-year-old aspiring artist named Tori Hare collapsed in Pennsylvania's Lebanon County Jail. I just want something to drink, she said to her mom on the phone days before she died. I want lemonade. Jefferson County settled the Lobato case for $2.5 million last fall. County spokesman Mark Techmeyer said the jail's withdrawal treatment and evaluation protocols changed in response to the death. Lebanon County officials declined to comment on the Air case. Outside of jails, dying from opiate withdrawal is exceedingly rare because, with few exceptions, it's so preventable. Dehydration, the withdrawal symptom that usually kills people, can be treated with IV fluids. It's nearly unheard of to withdraw from opioids without slowly tapering or having emergency medical care, says Kevin Fiskela, an addiction specialist who sits on the board of the National Commission on Correctional Healthcare, NCCHC, which accredits correctional health services. What's happening in jails, it's kind of a natural experiment to see what happens, he says, and in fact, some people do die. When a user quits opioids cold turkey, the body quickly starts to experience the opposite effects of the original drug, resulting in a rarely fatal but often torturous withdrawal process that can persist for days or weeks. Where opioids reduce pain, withdrawal makes the body hypersensitive to it. Opioids induce euphoria. Withdrawal feels like the world is going to end. Opioids cause constipation. Withdrawal causes diarrhea and vomiting. If a person going through withdrawal can't keep fluids down and is not given an IV, he or she can succumb to dehydration. So there's much more here in this article. It'll be in the description. But basically, yeah, this happens quite a bit. There are more examples in here as well. There's David Stochevsky, a 32-year-old from outside Detroit, losing 50 pounds over 16 days of vomiting, diarrhea, and trembling on the ground before his death in the summer of 2014 in the Macomb County Jail. So there's fucking many examples and probably hundreds more that we just don't know about because the families didn't sue. So
to address the first article, though, I mean, this is again narrative crafting. Every time this happens, they downplay it by saying, "Oh, it was a tragedy. It's such a shame." No, it's not a shame. It's fucking evil. There's a difference between tragedy and evil. Tragedy is something that happens. It isn't necessarily good. It usually isn't, but it happens, and it's usually an accident. This wasn't an accident. This was negligence. This was somebody who didn't care, didn't know the rules, or didn't care about the rules that he was supposed to follow, and basically used his own bias towards a person to determine whether or not they were well enough to have actual treatment. while violating a victimless crime.
Yet another example of if good cops existed, something would have been done, right?
Yeah, right, sure. I believe that when I see it.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. If they existed, something would have been done, but they don't, so nothing was.
Right.
I have to say it does feel that way at times, to be honest, because there's no justifying this. I'm sorry, but there is no justification for this amount of malfeasance. It's ridiculous, and each circumstance.
Statism. People will use that justification. Well, without government, who would? Well, I guess in this case,
who would let people die in their own vomit?
Yeah.
Oh, and speaking of that,
there's some services that the world doesn't need. That I would say is one of them.
and hey, speaking of services, some good news for bad news is that we're now officially supported by Brave. So you can click this link that I'm posting in the comments if you would like to support Bad Morning News, or if you're listening to audio, just know that it's brave.com/bad944. You can click that or use that link in some way. It's an ad-resistant, track-resistant browsing experience, and it helps support creators like me, not only because of fucking the ad link, which all revenue will be split among existing hosts, but it also has a system in it called the Basic Attention Token system, whereby people can support us by watching our content with this system active. So consider getting that, and consider supporting us. You get a free injection of tokens temporarily, so you could even support us for free after you get the browser. It's a win-win-win-win-win, and I hope y'all do it. But let's move on to the next story. Let's talk about Vietnam.
All right. So let me pull that one up for you guys. Found so many today. Right. So this is from Channel News Asia. And I'm going to try and push forward with this as fast as I can. So, Vietnam arrests 4 ahead of National Day. Authorities have repeatedly warned citizens not to heed calls to protest during the Independence Day celebrations. From Hanoi, Vietnam has arrested at least 4 people this week in a lead up to its National Day on Sunday, September 2nd. State media has said, accusing them of attempting to sabotage national security. The one-party communist state frequently jails and convicts critics, especially since a hardline administration took power in 2016. Authorities have warned citizens not to heed calls to protest during Sunday's Independence Day celebrations, vowing harsh penalties for anyone who causes, quote, social instability. On Saturday, police in the southern province of Canto arrested 2 men over their calls on Facebook for demonstrations, according to a report by state-run media. I am not going to try and pronounce this name, their names, unfortunately, but 2 gentlemen aged 42 and 40 also published posts defaming party, state, and senior leaders, the report said. The most high-profile detention was of an alleged member of the US-based anti-government group Viet Thanh, which Vietnam considers a terrorist organization. Le Quoc Binh, 44, was nabbed Wednesday in central Binh Dinh province in possession of 7 rifles and 500 bullets he had bought from neighboring Cambodia, according to the Ministry of Public Security. The cache of weapons was intended to, quote, cause unrest on National Day, it said, adding that Binh possessed many, quote, anti-state documents. A 38-year-old shrimp farmer was also arrested on Thursday in southern Betray province for planning a National Day protest. It remains if they were unconnected. At least 28 dissidents and bloggers have been convicted in Vietnam since the beginning of the year, according to a list tallied by AFP. Among them, outspoken activist Li Ding Long was sentenced to 20 years, the harshest penalty levied in recent years for his alleged role in calling for an election boycott and inciting environmental protests. And this event, the date itself, is to celebrate the Declaration of Independence by Ho Chi Minh, who founded the Communist Party of Vietnam. So, yeah, Vietnam, this is part of the reason why, if you're on Minds, people, there are so many Vietnamese now. The simple fact is that they are fleeing Facebook because what they put on Facebook, their government then puts them in jail for. So there's a good reason why I don't use Facebook anymore.
Oh, everybody, get a VPN. Get a VPN.
Oh, yeah.
I don't care which one it is, even though I would prefer you get Proton because I like that service a lot, and the more adoption it gets, the better it'll be. But get a VPN. Get a VPN. Just do it. Just make that decision. If you can't get a VPN in your country because it's oppressive, find somebody online from a site that you can get to who's distributing a file. Get a VPN. Do it. Absolutely.
Can we talk narrative crafting now? Because there were a couple that I found that I thought were quite amusing in a way. Because there's the one from Zero Hedge, and then there's the one from The Independent. Really depends on which way you want to throw it.
Let's do that, and then leave a little bit of time near the end for comments and this article on China.
Okay, let's go with The Independent for now, because this one I found quite amusing. Just the headline alone sort of tries to do the damage, okay? But the tagline breaks it. Trump meets, quote, pedophile cult, QAnon conspiracy theorist at White House. So already they've thrown in the idea that Trump's meeting with a pedo cult, not with with basically the people promoting a conspiracy theory. But then the tagline clears it up. President poses for picture with Michael LeBron, proponent of movement, which says deep state cabal is trying to destroy current administration. So yeah, I mean, it was mainly the headline for that one that did it. But Donald Trump has posed.
And by the way, just to say, like, it could also very well be simply that they were trying to discredit this guy for having believed in a pedophile cult at all.
Yes, it probably is to discredit the individual in question in particular. And I'll give you a very brief rundown from the article. So Donald Trump has posed for pictures in the White House with a TV commentator turned conspiracy theorist who's a leading light in a movement which suggests high-ranking Democrats are part of a global pedophile ring. The president granted the private Oval Office audience to Michael Lionel LeBron, a vocal proponent of the bizarre QAnon cult. The meeting was revealed after Mr. LeBron posted a photo of the pair along with his wife Lynn Shaw at Mr. Trump's desk. There are no words to explicate this profound honor, he wrote. But yeah, it basically ties in a number of the little bits. It's not that long, to be honest. It's just a brief blurb, but it does do its job to try and paint things in a certain light. And that light is to try and continue a narrative, particularly around Russian collusion, which then ties into this next article. Russian oligarch and Putin pal admit to collusion and secret meetings. Russian oligarchs Oleg Deripaska, a close associate of Vladimir Putin, has gone on record with The Hill's John Solomon, admitting to colluding with Americans leading up to the 2016 U.S. election. Except it might not be what you're thinking. Deripaska, rumored to be Donald Trump's back channel to Putin via the Russians' former association with Paul Manafort, says he colluded with the U.S. government between 2009 and 2016. In 2009, when Robert Mueller was running the FBI, the agency asked Deripaska to spend $25 million of its own money to bankroll an FBI-supervised operation to rescue a retired FBI agent, Robert Levison, who was kidnapped in 2007 while working on a 2007 CIA contract in Iran. This in of itself is more than a bit strange. Deripaska agreed. However, the Obama State Department, headed by Hillary Clinton, scuttled a last-minute deal with Iran before Levison could be released. He hasn't been heard from since. In other words, Trump's alleged back channel to Putin was in fact an FBI asset who spent $25 million helping Obama's, quote, scandal-free administration find a kidnapped agent. Deripaska has admitted, as New York Times frames it, Oh dear, bug on the page apparently. As the New York Times frames it, distancing Deripaska from the FBI, no mention of the 25 million rescue effort, for example. The Russian aluminum magnate was just one of several Putin-linked oligarchs the FBI tried to flip. Central to the recruiting effort were two central players in the Trump-Russia investigation, twice demoted DOJ number 4 official Bruce Orr, and Christopher Steele, the author of the largely unverified, quote, Steele dossier. Steele was a longtime associate of Orr and worked with Deripaska beginning in 2012, researching a business rival, work which would evolve to the point where the former British spy was interfacing with the Obama administration on his behalf, resulting in Deripaska regaining entry into the United States, where he visited numerous times between 2009 and 2017. So, yeah, this article goes on for a fair bit, to be honest, on just how wrong that avenue of investigation is to link it to Trump, because he was doing all the work before Trump was president. So how is he a back channel if he's not working for him when he is president? It just doesn't make sense. It's the classic non sequitur argument they have been using throughout. It's basically, look at all of this shiny stuff over here and ignore all of the incongruities because we can't explain them, and you shouldn't worry your pretty little heads about them.
Yeah. Well, and we've got Danielle in chat claiming that that she says, I'm so sick of all the Trump slander news. And I said, I'm not remotely sure it's slander, would love evidence. And she says, all you have to do is wait a few hours to hear how the stories fall apart. Well, I'd like to know what the stories are. Like all the stories? Which stories? Because the stories is very vague, and it seems, and I'm not going to say it is because I don't know, but it seems as though you're saying that these stories, because of their nature of being anti-Trump, will fall apart, and that they are false, because otherwise you would give examples. You wouldn't just say the stories. And I don't think that it's slander either. I think that people can get things wrong, but journalists are supposed to make the occasional mistake in their tireless attempts to make the news stories. She says the news stories. There are countless negative news stories that are true about Trump. I don't know what you're saying by the news stories.
I think she's referring to specifically ones from the mainstream media regarding things like Trump collusion with Russia, Russia basically being involved in mass hacking of the United States election, causing him to win, the whole 9 yards, basically, of what they've been trying to push.
Let's be clear. There's no good guys in politics either.
Oh, of course not.
You know, I don't think anyone should be spared or get the benefit of a doubt.
Well, right.
Now, and I think we're agreed on that front, but not everybody is. Some people do feel there is a benefit of a doubt needed for people who are in particularly being targeted, simply because the data has been so consistently wrong.
But Obama was targeted just as much. I don't care that it's not the, quote, mainstream media. He was still targeted just as much, if not more. So, I mean, let's be real specific. Let's be real specific and say that the volume of attacks you're getting doesn't imply anything. At least not if you're a major figure.
That I would agree with. If anything, the more people are shouting that you're doing something wrong, if they're, depending on where they are, it may not actually be that wrong. That's the problem. It may be their own prejudice of the matter, as it were.
Right, and
influencing it.
Let's remember, fucking Trump is one of the birthers. He's one of the original birthers, asking for demanding by mob action Obama's birth certificate, and so he had no evidence that Barack Obama was like born in Kenya, you know, fucking a Kenyan agent designed to spread Islam in America, but he somehow spread this enough that even John fucking Warhawk xenophobe jingoist McCain fucking stood up for him. So let's be real specific and say that Trump getting a bunch of fake news is actually kind of fucking funny. You know, I don't like this whole Trump is a victim narrative because it's bullshit. A, he's a big boy. He can handle himself. And B, fucking the whole thing, that falls apart real quick because there's enough evidence to make stories. People don't say he is unless, you know, they're a comedian, in which case they should probably not talk about politics. People say that this seems to be what it is, and that's what journalism is. I mean, realistically speaking, we ascribed malice earlier in this episode to the cops who let that woman die. And, you know, I think that's a fair assessment, but I'm not in that cop's head. The only thing I can say with verifiable certainty is that a pig let a woman die. But beyond that, it's all speculation. And you could call me a slander artist because I'm saying that this cop was, you know, maliciously ignorant of a drug abuse person in jail. Fucking, I don't, fucking let's just say addict, fucking in jail. But, you know, I don't think it's remotely slander to just simply assert that there's a possibility of this. That's what journalism is. And
possibility. Yes, I'll agree with you up to a point. I do agree with you that Trump's a big boy. He can take this. He's doing a very good job of taking this, as far as I'm concerned. Because every time he does come out with something that's honest, that the media then jumps on to say, "Oh no, he must be lying about this." They shoot themselves in the foot. So more power to them. I'm all for that because it discredits them religiously, effectively.
In the same way that the Barry Soetoro fucking Kenyan Muslim fucking Satanist Antichrist Dinesh D'Souza jizz fucking right-wing smear media literally smeared Obama for his entire fucking term. And fine, good. I'm an anarchist. I'm on nobody's team. In fact, I was one of the people against Obama, although I did the verifiable thing and went with the verifiable routes instead of just Obama, Barry Soetoro, Kenyan Muslim, Satan, Antichrist, because...
Yeah, you don't need to go down that route. You've got all the actual scandals he was privy to.
I have him joking about droning the Jonas Brothers. They got too close to his chick.
Yeah, so, that kind of shit. And I don't think that was a joke either.
Well, I mean, you can joke and also be serious. I mean, otherwise Doug Stanhope wouldn't have a job. So, but I'm not saying that you should just believe the narrative because the MSM is run by corrupt people as well. I support Gamergate, yo. Like, you can't do that and also not say that there's a problem with the press. Not unless you just believed the mainstream media and thought, hey, this is a good hashtag to jump in if I want to bash me some tits. But, you know, there is a problem with mainstream media, and I will admit that. The information war, for instance, says, to be fair, targeting Obama and Trump with their narrative is misleading the masses who implicitly and dumbly trust talking heads on TV, but luckily we're building up counter-narratives. Oh, can't put links in here. I was trying to put the link to this Mika Brzezinski. Our job is to control exactly what people think. Well, join our... You're in our Discord, so just post it there if you haven't already. But basically, yeah, like that's... Because I
do have a problem with that mentality.
I don't want to support the media. Fuck the media. Fuck the Bilderberg-controlled fucking bankster cock down the throat goddamn bullshit media. But also, fuck the people who do the exact opposite because they make our job harder. They make the job of reasonable people harder because they make it seem like the media's narrative might be true. Because the media is now being attacked like the Lügenpresse was during World War II, and as a result, everybody can cry fascism, nobody's having a rational conversation, and it makes our job harder. I'm fine with criticizing the media, but to just say the news stories and to say that, you know, the news
Accuracy
stories fall
important.
apart and are slander seems to me to be too broad-based a statement to either take seriously or not argue with, which I will neither take it seriously nor not argue with it.
I think the main thing to point out is it's not the news stories that don't make the mainstream media news are, to my view, how negative the tariffs actually are. Those types of things. The actual things that are really bad ideas that he has that should be considered things we should avoid. Now, there are a few of them. Yeah, like his wall, like his tariffs. The problem is that that isn't what the media talks about, is it? Let's be brutally honest here. They talk about
the majority.
The majority of the ones that we follow. Yes, they'll talk about it.
65 to 70% of the mainstream narrative is about Russia-Trump collusion.
That is, and it's that 60%. I think that Daniel's referring to in particular here, because it is that preponderance of data that is just dross out there. It has been fully discredited, I think, up to this point.
And let's be real specific. She says MSM is asking to be scoffed at and seems oblivious to what they're doing. Really? I mean, which is negative intelligence, she says. Really? They seem oblivious? I think they know exactly what they're doing, and they don't care. The resistance
Mockingbird never ended, people.
Right.
No,
exactly.
It never did. They're still trying to control the narrative. That's the problem. It's not that they don't care. It's that they think they can still win with this policy.
That's why they don't care. They're throwing all of this to the wind, and they don't care. They don't care that they might be wrong. They care that they can get their narrative out there before tomorrow, so that they get their clicks and so that they keep people's eyes on their content. That's what they care about. They know how fucking modern advertising works. They know how modern SEO works, and they know that if they're going to get their narrative out there, they have to basically create muck for other people to rake. Media Matters is the overlord. No, they're the overlord of a specific sect of people. I mean, let's be very specific when we say that Media Matters is scoffed at by the left. Like Bill Maher is quotable as saying Media Matters, shut the fuck up. Because they ran a story on how the Economist's chili pepper American flag thing was denigrating to Mexican Americans, and he said, shut the fuck up, Media Matters. He said, Media Matters, shut the fuck up. This is Bill Maher. This is HBO. This is a completely different non-Soros sect of the media. The Bilderberg Group is a group. Do not forget that this is not as simple as finding one or two targets. Soros is one of them. The Rothschild bankers are some of them. The Rockefellers, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, all these major institutions that benefit from you thinking one or more ways, which is why the Space Force is happening, because a bunch of money gets to be jizzed into the economy by Trump when you have fucking Lockheed Martin benefiting from these contracts, and Northrop Grumman and Raytheon and Boeing and all these major institutions. And that's just like defense. We've got countless examples of the mainstream corporate bullshit narrative benefiting the corporate bullshit people, and it's not just Soros.
It's not just Media Matters. It's not just one entity.
Right.
This is a network. You mustn't think it's one-sided. It is a multifaceted nightmare that we are having to decouple from everything else that we have to deal with. And the problem is it's actively resisting that activity. So there are people who are working on this, apparently. There are people who believe, shall we say, that a certain group within the government is working against this sect. There are a number of elements that show that this sect does exist and it needs to be dealt with. How we deal with it is a different matter. I don't quite have the best answer for that.
And it might be a matter for another time, too.
Yes, given the fact that we're running massively over.
Here's my general advice. The problem is centralization. Decentralize in your physical life, but more importantly, decentralize in your mind. Because if you think that there's one big bad guy you can take down, one overlord, you're going to lose. These people know this. They know that they can't have all their eggs in one basket, and they don't.
Now, there are thousands of people involved in this sort of thing.
And there are thousands of overlords.
Yes, and you need to take them all down. You need to bring them all down at once if you really want to break the network. That's the kind of thing that RICO laws were made for, which is why I hope to see them used, and why I've been sharing around how to pull PACER report data out of the system with just by looking at specific locations and their court information. You can find out just how much RICO activity is going on. And you know that 40,000 sealed indictments thing that I keep going on about? That number keeps growing every month by about 5,000. This kind of stuff is unheard of in American history, because from those report documents, if you go back far enough, you usually get 1,000 a year of sealed indictments. So whatever is going on right now is big. We have no idea who exactly is involved. All we know is that a lot of people are going to be facing some courts of some description.
And she says, start somewhere.
We get too optimistic here, though, Lupinate. You know, we should.
I'm not saying all of them are going to go to jail. I'm not saying all of them are going to be found guilty. I'm not saying any of them. It could all be just a massive shell game, for all I know. But at the moment, I've got to. I guess the best way to say this is. From the fruits, you will know what this actually is. The fruits of the endeavor will determine how good this is. Yeah. But I personally, I never believe ends justify the means. But I do want to see what the ends of this actually are trying to achieve.
Well, I was mostly just saying that because we do need to get it wrapped up here. We are running.
No, that's fair enough. We are running over time, but we did start late.
And I think a good way to wrap this up would be to say that yes, as she's saying, start somewhere. I doubt they can all be brought down at once. I agree. It's absolutely imperative that we start somewhere, but we should start in our own minds. We should start in our own minds, move out to our communities, move out to the people in our action groups who can actually do something, and then find enough targets to take down at once that we can have that sort of change where everybody is starting somewhere, and where enough of this network will be impacted that they'll at least know they're dealing with something that they can't control, because they're mortal. These people bleed. They get sick. They get cancer. They almost get dropped in their casket. They die. So let me be real specific. These people are mortal.
Yes,
treat them like they're mortal. Treat them like they have interests and hobbies and family and financial shit that you can fuck with. Treat them as though they're people, because treating them as though they're some sort of overlord or god, and then also simultaneously saying how dumb they are, which is what a lot of people fall victim to, and it pisses me right the fuck off. Thinking that there is any central point, that there is some core that you can take down, that this won't require a massive vitriolic struggle against the powers that be. That is going to be our greatest weakness. So my advice, empower yourself. Know the tools, know the pitfalls. Smash the state, fuck the system. This has been Bad Morning News.
Have a bad morning, everybody.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Bad morning, guys.